Chapter 7. In the Wrong Path. Little Christian went on toward the village as quickly as he could, but soon became very tired indeed. His burden seemed to grow heavier every minute, until at last he felt ready to fall down beneath its weight. By the time he reached the hill, he could scarcely walk, and he wondered whether he would ever be able to get to the house in which the friends of Worldly lived. But when he turned the corner of the road which led around the hill, he almost forgot his burden, for he had never before seen anything so terrible as that path. The side of the hill was very rugged, and the rocks hung over the road and looked ready to fall. Christian went a little way, but he was so frightened that he dared not take another step. He fancied he could see flames of fire darting out between the rocks, and he shook all over with fear. "Oh, I wish I had not come," he sobbed. "What shall I do?" Presently a man appeared at a distance, and as he came near, Christian saw it was Evangelist. He had no smile on his face, and poor little Christian felt so ashamed and miserable that he almost wished the rocks would fall and hide him from the sight of the friend whom he had disobeyed. "What are you doing here?" said Evangelist. But little Christian hung down his head and did not speak. "Are you not the little boy whom I found crying outside the city of destruction?" "Yes," sobbed Christian. "Did I not show you the way to the Wicket-Gate?" "Yes." "Then how is it you are here? For this is not the way to the gate." "Oh," cried little Christian, "I did not mean to do wrong, but I met a boy who told me I could get rid of my burden in the village, and I was so tired I thought I would come. But I'm sure the hill will fall on me, and I'm so frightened." Then Evangelist said, "Listen to me. The king sent me to tell you about the celestial city, and you had his promise that he would love you and watch over you. When you fell into the slough, you know he sent help to pull you out. And you have read in your book that he will always take care of those who trust him. Why did you believe that Worldly said and turn away from the right path?" Poor little Christian was now crying very bitterly, and Evangelist laid his hand gently on the child's head. "You have grieved the king very much," he said, "but if you are sorry, he will forgive you." "I will never be naughty again," cried little Christian. "I am very, very sorry indeed. But are you sure that the king will forgive me?" "Yes, the king will always forgive you for the sake of his dear son who loved the little children." "And may I go back to the Wicket-Gate? Or will the man turn me away?" "The king does not allow him to turn anyone away. You only have to knock, and he will open the gate for you at once. Take my hand, and I will go with you past the hill." Little Christian wiped away his tears and was very glad to put his hand in Evangelist's and be led back into the fields. The hill, with its terrible overhanging rocks, was soon left behind, and the light above the Wicket-Gate could be clearly seen. "If you make haste," said Evangelist, "you will reach the gate before it is dark, and you can stay there and rest until morning." Then, with a kiss and a smile, he told the child goodbye, and little Christian started once more on his journey. Chapter 8. Little Christian enters the Wicket-Gate. The sun was just setting when little Christian reached the Wicket-Gate. He had walked very quickly, for he did not wish to be in the fields after the darkness came, and he was now so tired that he felt very glad indeed to see the gate quite close. It stood in a beautiful stone archway, and over it hung a lamp, which burned so brightly that its light could be seen even when the sun was shining. Round the top of the arch, some words were carved upon the stone, and little Christian stopped to read them. The words were these: "Knock, and it shall be open unto you." That was just what Evangelist said, thought Christian, and he began to knock upon the door. He listened, but he could not hear anyone coming. So he knocked again, and in a few minutes the door was opened by a man who looked something like Evangelist. He wore the same kind of long robe, and his face was grave and quiet. He smiled when he saw Christian and said, "Who is this little child?" "I'm little Christian," replied the boy. "May I come in?" Are you come from the city of destruction?" asked the man, whose name was Goodwill. "Yes, and I wish to go to the king." Then Goodwill opened the gate quite wide and took little Christian by the hand. As he was stepping in, Goodwill gave him a pull. "Why'd you do that?" asked Christian. And Goodwill answered, The wicked prince has a castle very near this gate, and when he sees anyone leaving his country and entering the way of the king, he commands his soldiers to shoot arrows at him." Little Christian looked out and saw arrows lying upon the ground, and he felt very pleased to see Goodwill close the door. "Now I am safe," he said. Goodwill led him into his own house, which was just beyond the gate, and made him sit down to rest while he prepared some food for him. "Who told you the way to the gate?" he asked. "Evangelist," replied little Christian, "and he said you would tell me where to go next." "Yes, I will tell you. But how is it that you come alone? Have you no father or mother?" "My mother is with the king, and my father has so much to do that he cannot spare time for a journey, so I was obliged to come by myself." "If your mother is with the king, she must have passed through this gate. No doubt you will hear of her as you go on your way." "Do you think I shall?" said little King Christian eagerly, for the greatest wish he had was to know something more of that dear mother whom he had lost so long ago. "Help said that the king would tell her I was coming, and she would look out for me. Is that true?" "Quite true. You will not see her until you reach the celestial city, but she will often be able to see you. Have you come straight from home? Did not the boys try to persuade you to stay with them?" "Obstinate and Pliable came after me, and Obstinate was angry, but Pliable said he would like to go to the celestial city. Then we fell into the slough, and he was frightened, so he went back again. I thought I should never get out, but help came, and he was very good to me." "And what then?" Little Christian blushed. "I was as bad as Pliable," he said, "for when I met Worldly, I listened to him and turned away toward the village. The road is so dreadful, and I was afraid of the rocks, that they would crush me, but Evangelist found me and brought me into the fields again. And now you have entered the king's gate, and you are one of his little pilgrims. Tonight you must sleep here, and tomorrow I will show you the way to the celestial city." Chapter 9. Little Christian Visits the Interpreter. When the morning came, little Christian felt quite rested and ready for another day's journey. Goodwill brought him out and showed him a narrow pathway which went straight across the plain. "Are there any turnings?" asked Christian. "How shall I know if I come to a place where there are two roads?" "The way of the king is always quite straight," said Goodwill, "and all the paths that lead out of it are crooked, and the wrong paths are generally wide, while the right path is narrow. If you look carefully, you will not mistake it." "I wonder whether you could unfasten my burden for me," asked little Christian, when he was saying goodbye. "I could walk so much better without it." "I cannot do that," said Goodwill. "You must carry it patiently until you come to the cross, and then it will fall off, and you will never see it again." "Oh, how glad I shall be then," sighed little Christian. "Are there any other houses on the way beside this one?" "Yes. About the middle of the day you will pass the house of the interpreter. He's very kind, and if you ask to see him, he will show you many wonderful things." The morning was bright and pleasant, and little Christian enjoyed his walk very much. The birds were singing so merrily that he felt as if he must sing with them, and the air was so fresh and sweet that it seemed to take away all the weariness which had troubled him in the city of destruction. "There is nothing to hurt me here," he thought. "Worldly did not speak the truth when he said I should be frightened." Just when he was beginning to think that he would like to rest a little while, he saw a large house standing near to the road, and he knew it must be the house of the interpreter. He went up to the door and knocked, and presently a servant came to ask what he wanted. "I am a little pilgrim," he said, "on my way to the king's city. I stayed at the Wicket-Gate last night, and Goodwill told me that the master of this house is his friend. May I speak to him?" The servant went back and called his master, and soon the interpreter came out. He was an old man with a tall figure and a long white beard, and Christian thought he looked very wise. He put his hand on the child's head and saying, "What can I do for you, my little boy?" "Would you mind showing me some of your wonderful things?" asked little Christian. He spoke timidly, for he could not help thinking that, although the interpreter might be pleased to have grown-up visitors at his house, a little pilgrim like him would perhaps be in the way. "Goodwill told me I might come to see you," he added. The interpreter smiled. "Goodwill is my friend," he said. "Are you one of the king's little pilgrims? Come in, and I will find something that you will like to see." He took Christian's hand and led him into the hall where the servant was still waiting. The interpreter asked for a lamp, and when it was brought to him, he opened the door of a large room. Curtains were drawn before the windows, but the light of the lamp filled all the room with brightness. On the wall, opposite to the door, hung a picture, and when little Christian saw it, he clasped his hands and stood quite still. It was a picture of a man whose face was more beautiful than anything which little Christian had ever imagined. He was walking over a mountain path. All around him, among the rocks, grew briars and thorns, which had torn his garments in many places, and his feet were bleeding, for the rough stones had wounded them. In his arms he carried a little lamb. It was tired, and had laid its head upon his shoulder, and he was looking down at it with gentle, loving eyes. Underneath the picture, in letters of gold, were written the words, "He shall gather the lambs with his arm and carry them in his bosom." "Was the lamb lost?" asked little Christian. "Yes," replied the interpreter, "lost and ready to die. Do you not see how tired it looks, and how its fleece is torn and soiled? But the good shepherd heard its cry, and he never rested until he had found it, and then he brought it home in his arms." "It must have been a hard path," said little Christian. "The stones have cut his feet." It was a very hard path, but he did not mind that, because he loved his little lamb. I have shown you this picture first, because the good shepherd is our king's own son, and just as the shepherd loves his flock, so he loves the pilgrims. The little pilgrims are like the lambs. You can think of this when you are sad or frightened and remember who is watching over you. "Well, I am a little pilgrim," said Christian, looking up at the interpreter. "A little pilgrim and a little lamb in the flock of the good shepherd. Now I will show you something else."